You have instructional design questions. We discuss answers.
Chuck, today we're going to be talking about ADDIE. I remember the first time that I heard that acronym ADDIE. It was when I was interviewing a UMBC ISD graduate student for a promotional video that I was producing. And when he said the word, I had no idea what he was talking about. I honestly thought that he was talking about maybe somebody named ADDIE. He was going to start talking about this person. I had no idea. And by the time he got done, though, talking about the first letter of the acronym, analysis, then I started to think, okay, this is a little less confusing. And I'm understanding a little bit more why ADDIE is important to people who work in the ISD world. Now, ADDIE, from what I understand, is an important functional ISD principle that helps guide our ISD work when we do it. And so thankfully I have you, my co-host Chuck, here to explain this a little bit further to myself and those who are viewing this right now, because there are some misconceptions around ADDIE. And I feel like there's a lot of things that we do not know, that we don't even realize we don't know, that if we knew, it would help us out a lot. So, Chuck, my burning question to you tonight is, what is ADDIE?
ADDIE. Wow. ADDIE is the name of a cat.
I knew it.
See? Most instructional designers that get a cat after 602 or an introductory course in instructional design name that animal ADDIE. And I'm forever sorry that happens, but it really does happen.
Yeah, there are a lot of ADDIEs going through vet offices right now.
There's one too many. But ADDIE it's such a major part of what people think instructional design is. And it's an important aspect of it. Well, the important thing about ADDIE is how it got to be ADDIE and why we have this at all. And once you understand the history of how it got here and what importance it played in the history of instructional design, then you understand why ADDIE's kind of the thing. You have to know what it means. You have to be at least literate about it, be able to talk about it. But what we're going to find out here as we go through this is it's not the floor plan for how you do all of your instructional design work. It's not the gatekeeper of function. It's something else. And that something else is really important, but it's not what some people think it is.
I have a question. So do you feel like in your ISD work that you've done out there that ISD professionals rely on ADDIE? Do people
Yes.
use it? Okay, so they do.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing about ADDIE is instructional designers do all 5 things in ADDIE. They do analysis, they do design, they do development, they do implementation, and they do evaluation. All of these things happen in ISD, and that's how it evolved to be as important as it is today. But the thing about it is it's a theoretical platform. It's the framework for how you explain ISD to people. It's how you think about how you function as a designer or a manager of the process. And for a second, you want to look back at the history of this, how we got to ADDIE?
Yeah,
And I think that
absolutely.
makes a lot of sense.
I think so
So,
too.
so let's start with where ADDIE came from. So instructional design in its present form really evolved during World War II. So Gagne, Briggs, Mager, Merrill, lots of people were involved with the military at that point because we had hundreds of thousands of people to train, and we're trying to train them the way we would train a classroom of 15 people. So they called in the people like Gagne and others to come up with a plan. How can we do this systematically and scientifically? And this is where ADDIE came from. So originally, the term ADDIE came from Florida State in 1973 or 1974, but it was originally called a System Approach to Training, or SAT. And the reason that's important is because instructional design is systems approach to training, to designing curriculum, to putting together programs, this whole notion of a system. So out of World War II and early into other implementations of it, then into the Army with Florida State in the 70s. And this is how we got to ADDIE. And all ADDIE was really meant to do was to be the scientific framework for what instructional design is as a science. So you look at the foundational aspects of other sciences, so Einstein's work or Curie's work or any of these. And if you look back, there's acronymical approaches to trying to explain this. So that's how it became important because it's just the thing. It's where it came from.
And so when this happened, when this evolved, I'm really curious about when I picture people sitting around a table and hashing these ideas out and coming up with this solution in the form of this acronym ADDIE that is used today, and how that is pushed out into the world. So they came up with this system during World War II, and how did such a system that is so critical to work today get pushed out and accepted by the world as it is?
Because it was successful. And that's the thing. So once you integrated a systems approach to training in the training of pilots is where it started. Because there was a lot of issues with them not being able to select good candidates for aviation school, but also they were having a lot of trouble training them. So then you got into artillery training and all the other things that took place. And they saw the inefficiencies before and they saw the efficiencies after. So you're talking about exponential growth and efficiency. So you could train 250,000 people in the time that you might have trained 200,000, over 6 years before. So the reason it became popular and the reason it evolved the way it did is because it worked. It still works.
Proof is in the pudding,
It's
so to
it's
speak.
that's the pudding. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's the real deal.
So, all right, we've talked about the acronym itself. Can you go into a little bit more about what those elements actually are for somebody who is
Sure.
completely unfamiliar with what ADDIE even stands for?
Yeah, and this is fair. And what you'll find is designers use the terminology and the acronym a lot to explain this to people who've never heard of ISD. They don't understand what the process is. So when I would do board reports or work with large clients or any client for that matter, I would always say we use the ADDIE approach. This is our framework. This is the science of it. So ADDIE is analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. And there's some misunderstanding that these are very linear and you work through one to go to the next and what have you. And that's not the way it works. You might start with evaluation. It just depends on what your project is and everything else that goes with it. But these are the 5 things that every designer does on every project, no matter what you call it or or how you assign a name to it. Everybody does ADDIE.
So, for somebody who is about to embark on a project, how do they know which step to start with? Is it intuitive to the project itself, do you feel? Or is it something that is really developed by the organization itself, the mindset of the organization, the people who are working for them? What creates that? If it's not linear, how do we know where to start?
And see, Denise, that's the point of this. People that think that this is a roadmap to designing programs or courses or curriculum, whatever you want to say, have misunderstood what ADDIE is. ADDIE is not the roadmap.
And I would think, like in my mind, as a student of ISD, I just assumed
Hmm.
that it
Yeah.
was a roadmap. When I think of a roadmap, I think of, okay, I need to get from point A to point B. How am I going to get there? And so my linear mind, the analytical linear
You
mind
go
of
right
mine,
through them. A,
I'm
D,
like,
D,
okay, it's easy to follow.
I.
Step one, step
Yeah.
two, step
Yeah.
three. My
Yeah.
mind wants to do step one, step two, step three, up to step 20. But it doesn't
And
always work that way, I guess.
it doesn't work that way. And the notion is that you don't have to do them in a linear order, but you have to do all of them. You have to do some portion of analysis. You obviously design. I mean, you can't get away from the design. Development is when you look at materials to do programming. It's where they do the pamphlets, the books, handouts, whatever. So you get into implementation. Okay, well, we know what that is. That's what most people know. It's either sitting in the classroom or teaching, right? Or now these days, being online, sitting at your kitchen table taking a course. And evaluation, for the most part, is ignored, but it's still part of the ADDIE model. So, as a designer, if I'm talking to you, someone who doesn't know anything about instructional design, never heard of ADDIE, I will say to you, the reason you need to trust this process is because this is what we do. These are the things that we do. May not do them in this order, and it may look different every time, but these are the bases. These are all the boxes we check every time we design a course or put together a program. And you should feel some confidence in this because this is a science. This is the basis of the science of instructional design.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter. It's not so important when the step happens, but that it actually happens.
That you address it. And the other part of that, Denise, is you have to think, okay, well, maybe I'll make a decision I don't need to do analysis. but you had the process in your head. You had to ask the question, okay, do I need analysis this time or do I have enough data that I feel comfortable moving ahead? You can't just say, I'm just going to start designing,
Right.
'cause it
Right.
doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
That's not the way a science works.
And I'm assuming by just asking yourself that question, sometimes that's enough of an analysis step where you've actually analyzed it by asking yourself the question. And so therefore, if the answer to that question is yes, I have enough documentation here and data to be able to say that I've analyzed this, then I can move on to another step.
You can move on, but you have to ask the question. And that's the importance of this. None of this is ignored, at your peril, but none of this is ignored.
Right. And also, I think it's important to note that there are different people involved in every step of this way. So, yeah, so it's not just one person, one ISD professional going through all of these 5 steps, 5 elements.
But it could be. But it
It
could
could
be. And
be.
see, that's the thing. In instructional design, you can be a lone wolf. You can be the only designer. You can have an entire firm that's all you. You can do every portion of it. I've seen designers that do the artwork, that do the design, that print the thing, that do the video, whatever aspect of a course, they do it themselves. They're a complete in-house shop. And I also know design operations. I had a design operation where I had 30 instructional designers at one time on one project. And we were working with 200 some SMEs. And I had to find an auditorium to get everybody in the room at the same time. And that's certainly not the biggest project that's out there. So you can have any range of size here, but it still applies. It's still exactly the same rules.
Right. And that there's a comfort level in that, knowing that it's not just there is a science behind it, science backed, and it's a roadmap in the sense that not a linear roadmap, but just being able to see that these are the marks that you need to step on it at one point or another. And no matter how big in scope this project is, you still have to do that.
And the science part of it bothers some people. They think of what instructional designers do as an art. Okay, I'm a teacher, so I'm an artist. I paint things that students learn from and, whatever artistic kind of metaphor you want to come up with. But the fact of the matter is, it is a science. And the reason it's a science is you always have a hypothesis. Okay, you're always out to prove something. So when you write objectives, that's your hypothesis. I think this student should be able to do this at the end of this course. That's your hypothesis. And you have the scientific method and you have ways to measure this. And if you look at it, it's okay, not only is all that stuff there, but this is replicable. Okay, you can do this 500 times and you can do 500 courses with the same model. You yourself, as a designer, as a team. And that's why, again, it's a science. I can replicate it. I have a hypothesis. I know what I want to prove. And every time I have to go out there and do that. And there's different ways to get from A to Z, but it's the same thing. I have a scientific process.
Hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how somebody would actually use ADDIE in ISD?
I think, when you first learn, it's about, okay, let's make sure we know what the basic components of instructional design are. And you need to be an analyst. You need to be a designer. You need to know how to develop materials and do pilot testing. You need to be able to know how to put together instruments you need for implementation. So teacher's guides or anything else you might want to do. And the last thing that's so important is you have to know how to do evaluation. If you can't evaluate mastery or whether someone has achieved mastery, then what have you done? I mean, go to a lecture and listen. Okay, fine. What'd you learn?
Yeah.
So a designer is going to look at all these things and put this together, and they work together. They really do.
Hmm. Yeah, evaluation. We've had conversations on the side about this that they're so
It's-
important.
yeah,
And I've
it's
interviewed
about 5 shows I think we're going to do, right?
Yeah,
At least.
I've
Yeah.
interviewed quite a few people about evaluation and their role with it and their lack of role with it even because smile sheets, they rely on smile sheets. And we're gonna have some time, we're gonna have some fun talking about
That's
evaluations in
going to be a whole
upcoming
show is
sessions.
smile sheets. And half of our audience will be very happy and half will be unhappy with me. But we're still going to have that conversation because people need to realize what they do and what they don't do. They do some good things, but they don't tell you a thing about mastery. Not a thing.
No, nope, not at all. the last thing I want to talk about with ADDIE is the common misunderstandings that we have around ADDIE, because I know there are some. Can you go into some of those?
Well, the first is something we've talked about, that you follow it linear, that it does this, it does that. I think the second misconception is that it's a workflow issue, that you use ADDIE for workflow. And so you've got people that come out with other models, and we're going to do another show on ISD models, but there are probably thousands of ISD models. And we used to have a joke in the academic world about everybody got a PhD and ISD had their own ISD model because that's what they'd write their dissertation on. And some of my friends will not be happy with this, but okay, it's still ADDIE. And then you've got SAM, right? People are happy with SAM. They want to do SAM. And SAM is ADDIE. But SAM is a more applicable workflow kind of approach than ADDIE is. And you have to look at these things and say, okay, is this showing me what I need to do in every step, or is this giving an outline of what the basic processes are? So you got the Kemp model, you've got Dick and Carey, you've got, rapid prototyping, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. That came out of programming.
Hmm.
Rapid prototyping, if you think about it, what that does is you write a lot of code and you plug in the code that you already wrote where you need it. So rapid prototyping in instructional design is an approach. You can call it a model, but it's actually a practical approach where you have all of these components and you just change minute parts of it where the content changes. So there's all these fascinating things to do, but ADDIE is not that. Nobody's going to sit down and do ADDIE. I mean, they're going to do all the stuff, but it's not a workflow. It's not meant to be.
Hmm. This has been a really interesting conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot more about ADDIE myself, and I hope that our viewers have as
Good.
well.
And put
And
questions in the comments, and we will answer all the questions too, by the way.
absolutely. So, yes, if you have any questions for Chuck about ADDIE, please go ahead and put them in that comments section, and we will get back to you on that. We really will. And also in the comments, if you have any suggestions for future shows, things that you're dying to know, then please let us know, and we'll consider putting a show around that as well.
And please be sure to name your animals ADDIE.
I'm telling
Send
you.
us a picture.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That would be so cool.
We will post it. We will have a whole show with ADDIE pictures.
Yes, find us on LinkedIn and send us the photos, and we will do a whole show on animals called ADDIE.
That's right. It'll be so much fun. I can't wait.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I would say that this is a wrap to tonight's show. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We really appreciate your time, and we hope that you found this helpful.